This is Takoda Collins, a 10-year-old from Dayton, Ohio. Although he's smiling in this photo, it doesn't reflect the reality of his life. When emergency responders arrived at his home, what they encountered revealed a deeply situation. That moment uncovered the beginning of a story that would lead to serious questions and a search for accountability. Takoda's case stands out for how devastating and heartbreaking it is. It's one of those stories that leaves a lasting impact, not just because of what happened, but because of how long it went unnoticed. This is the case file of Takoda Collins. Every detail, every unanswered question. On December 13, 2019, Dayton authorities received a concerning call about 10-year-old Takoda Collins from his father. The father reported the child was unresponsive, but the call took an unusual turn as McClain focused primarily on his frustrations with Takoda's behavior, rather than the medical emergency. He described his son as disobedient and repeatedly emphasized the challenges of parenting. At one point, when the dispatcher instructed McClain to administer CPR, he hesitated and made an alarming comment about an unpleasant smell coming from the boy. First responders arriving at the Kensington Drive residence encountered McClain waiting at the doorway while his son lay unresponsive in the living area. Medical personnel immediately noted the child had sustained multiple visible injuries. Dayton police officer Evans, recognizing the need to give paramedics space to work, escorted McClain outside. Even during this critical moment, McClain continued expressing grievances about his son's behavior, referring to him as uncontrollable and difficult to manage. The situation presented a deeply concerning disconnect between the father's focus on discipline and the child's evident need for urgent medical attention. Paramedics worked urgently to revive Takoda, but the signs of prolonged physical mistreatment were immediately apparent across his entire body. When medical personnel ultimately pronounced the child deceased, McClain responded with concerning indifference, merely stating that he had summoned help as quickly as possible. The child was transferred to a medical facility for comprehensive examination. A board-certified pediatric specialist conducted a thorough assessment, documenting evidence of widespread physical trauma. The examination revealed injuries affecting every major area of the body, including the head, torso, and all extremities. The doctor noted distinctive pattern marks across the chest and abdominal regions, along with evidence of older healed injuries. The medical report indicated trauma to all anatomical regions, with particular attention given to sensitive areas that raised additional concerns about the nature and duration of the mistreatment. Dr. 𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐿 shared that the injuries observed were not consistent with accidental causes or harm someone could cause to themselves. Instead, they pointed to repeated physical trauma occurring over an extended time frame. Several of the injuries were found in places on the body that are typically harder to injure without significant force. She also highlighted that many of the marks were in areas commonly associated with attempts to shield oneself, such as the backs of the arms and other parts that face outward during self-protection. Additionally, she discovered signs of earlier rib fractures that had not been documented in any previous medical reports for Takoda. Another detail noted by Dr. 𝐂𝐿𝐿 was the wrinkling on Takoda's hands, a condition usually seen when someone's skin has been exposed to water for an extended period. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts.
While the visible injuries were already deeply concerning, the internal findings shared by Deputy Coroner Dr. Brian Casto revealed the full extent of what Takoda had endured. His examination uncovered a wide range of trauma affecting various areas of the body, including the head, torso, and limbs. The autopsy results confirmed that Takoda had experienced both recent and older injuries, indicating that the harm was not a single incident, but part of an ongoing pattern. These internal details provided critical insight into the prolonged nature of the situation. Regarding Takoda's head, Dr. Casto identified additional injuries that were concealed beneath his hair. Photographs taken during the external examination revealed bruises on the right side of his forehead, his right chin, inside both the upper and lower lips, and within the left nostril. The internal investigation further detailed the severity of these wounds. When the scalp was lifted, significant bruising was found throughout the head. The external exam also showed small red spots, known as petechiae, on Dakoda's chest, which indicate minor bleeding. Inside, the examination uncovered bruising within the stomach area, highlighting the widespread impact of the injuries. Dakoda's back displayed serious injuries both externally and internally. The examination revealed significant pulmonary edema, which means there was fluid accumulation in the lungs. Medical experts determined this was connected to prolonged exposure to water. Additionally, Dr. Casto found multiple fractures affecting several ribs. A thorough inspection of Dakoda's digestive system uncovered a striking finding. The contents of his stomach were a tan yellow, puree-like material, closely matching the color and consistency of human waste. This detail added an important dimension to the overall assessment of his condition. The external examination of Dakoda's back and the backs of his legs revealed both old scars and recent bruises. A distinct marking was also found on his back, positioned in a way that would make it nearly impossible for Dakoda to have caused it himself. The internal evaluation provided the most insight into the severity of these injuries. His entire back, reaching down to the bone, showed extensive bruising and swelling. Additionally, a serious injury was noted in his private area, consisting of 2 small cuts about ½ an inch in length. The internal assessment revealed the full extent of the damage. Within the pelvic region, a significant amount of blood was present, corresponding to the injury observed externally. The most critical injury connected to Dakoda's passing was not visible from the outside. It involved severe bruising at the back of his neck. Upon internal examination, deep bruising was found affecting all the muscle layers surrounding the spine. Dr. Casto explained that injuries of this nature are typically associated with extreme trauma, often seen in catastrophic events such as major car crashes. Following a comprehensive autopsy and investigation, Dr. Casto officially concluded that 10-year-old Takoda Collins died due to blunt force trauma in combination with compressive asphyxia and water submersion. The cause of death was formally classified as a homicide, indicating that his injuries were the result of deliberate harm by another individual. While Takoda was examined, law enforcement remained at the Kensington address with his father, McLean. Shortly after Takoda's remains were transported, McLean's girlfriend arrived at the house accompanied by her sister and a young child around 3 years old. Amanda Hines, age 30, was the girlfriend, and her sister, Jennifer Ebert, was 27. Upon their arrival, McLean casually mentioned, "Yeah, they actually live with me." It soon became clear that the little boy was not McLean's son, but his younger brother. Several hours into the interview at the home, police secured a search warrant to inspect the entire house. The area on the ground floor where everyone had been staying appeared well kept, with furniture, running water, stocked food, and even photos of pets decorating the walls. Notably, there were no pictures or signs of Takoda anywhere in the space. Downstairs, the house contained 2 bedrooms, one shared by McLean and his girlfriend, and the other occupied by Jennifer. The young boy had his own room filled with toys and clothing. However, there was no designated space for Takoda. Investigators found no belongings such as clothes, books, or toys suitable for a child of Takoda's age. The basement included a room used for dogs, which contained multiple crates and animal waste. Upstairs, detectives accessed the attic, where they were immediately met with a strong, unpleasant odor, identified as human waste. The attic had no lighting, so flashlights were necessary to see inside. Apart from a broken chair, the space held no furniture. Only debris and insects filled the area.
The attic led to a locked room, which the detectives forced open to gain entry. Inside, they encountered a scene that resembled something out of a chilling movie. The small space contained a tarp stained with old dried marks, along with a worn and filthy lawn chair. In addition, there was a camera set up to monitor Takoda while he was confined in the room. According to the detectives, this camera had been recently unplugged, most likely at the moment McLean became aware that his son had passed away. The tarp-covered area was not always where Takoda spent the night. It was only provided to him as a sort of privilege when he was deemed well-behaved. For the most part, however, Takoda was kept in the attic under far more severe and harsh conditions, a space that resembled a place intended to cause distress and discomfort rather than comfort or safety. The three adults who were living at the home were immediately taken into custody and brought in for interviews. Once the questioning began, McClain's statements quickly took a troubling turn. Rather than acknowledging any responsibility, he shifted the blame onto his son, painting himself as the one who had been wronged. Despite mounting evidence, McClain continued to insist he had done nothing wrong. The investigators reminded him clearly it was his duty to explain how and why Takoda lost his life. As the discussion continued, he stuck to a version of events that placed all fault on Takoda. He spoke as though his son's pain had been caused entirely by his own actions, sidestepping all indications of long-term mistreatment. His explanation centered around complaints about Takoda's behavior, suggesting that the child was often difficult, uncooperative, and made poor choices. He even claimed that Takoda regularly put himself at risk. It may seem obvious, but children who endure long-term physical, emotional, or mental trauma often show signs through their behavior. It's difficult to witness, but this is a painful reality for many. So when McClain described his son as acting out or behaving wildly, there's a good chance he was being truthful, at least about the behavior itself. What he failed to grasp was that Takoda's actions were a response to the environment he had been placed in. McClain spoke as if Takoda had always struggled with unusual behavior. He believed, or wanted others to believe, that his son had caused his own. In doing so, he attempted to remove any sense of responsibility from himself. What was most troubling was how casually McClain spoke about his son's condition, almost as if it had nothing to do with the treatment Takoda endured. He tried to frame it as an unfortunate incident beyond his control, ignoring the role he played in creating that outcome. It's difficult to believe, but McClain continued to insist that the responsibility rested with his son. This only highlighted how deeply he misunderstood or ignored his own role in what had happened. Then came an even more troubling claim. He mentioned that Takoda had been showing these kinds of behaviors since he was just 2 years old. At that age, a child is still learning how to speak and move through the world. Any signs of distress point to something much deeper. Still, McClain maintained that his son was to blame. When asked about the injuries, he stated that he placed Takoda in the bathtub to help with swelling. He claimed that it was his way of offering care after noticing marks on the boy's body. Oddly enough, McClain didn't explain how those marks got there in the first place. His only answer was that Takoda played too hard and often ended up hurting himself. That was the extent of his explanation. The way McClain described what happened to Takoda raised serious concerns. He insisted he had no idea his son was in danger, yet throughout the conversation, he repeated how Takoda would frequently harm himself. His statements didn't line up, and the investigators took notice. By now, it was evident that McClain was doing everything he could to shift the narrative. He spoke as though he was a parent under stress, dealing with a difficult child, ignoring the fact that he had kept his son isolated, neglected, and without care for a long period of time. Then, in a moment that caught everyone off guard, he said something completely unrelated. He brought up a topic that no one had asked about, suggesting he was being judged unfairly. Without any prompt, McClain suddenly referenced a topic that hadn't been mentioned in the interview. His decision to make that comment out of the blue only raised more concerns about what he might have been trying to hide.
The investigators turned their attention to the locks on the attic door, the very space where Takoda had been confined. McClain responded that the locks were installed for dogs, not for his child, an answer that did little to ease concerns. The more he continued, the less convincing his story became. He acknowledged that Takoda hadn't seen a doctor in years, insisted he was fine despite obvious signs of distress, and even suggested that his son misled mental health professionals. None of this helped his credibility. When asked about schooling, his explanation didn't hold up. He said Takoda ruined his own learning materials, so he stopped trying to educate him altogether. Instead of getting proper support, Takoda was left without education or care. No matter how the questioning unfolded, the outcome wasn't looking good for 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐻. If he was honest, the truth would still be damaging. If he wasn't, his falsehoods would only strengthen the case against him. The evidence already pointed to serious wrongdoing. The detective continued to challenge the inconsistencies in McLean's version of events, aiming to help him clarify what really occurred on Takoda's final day. McLean described seeing his son engage in harmful behavior through security footage, but chose not to intervene, saying it was something he had grown used to. This raises serious questions about his awareness and inaction. It's hard to imagine staying composed in a conversation like that, yet the detective remained focused, pressing forward with calm determination as the details unfolded. Eventually, McLean admitted he didn't take Takoda to a hospital because he feared being blamed, but that very fear was a reflection of his own conscience. He understood how bad it looked. Throughout the interview, McLean insisted he was dealing with a difficult child, presenting himself as overwhelmed. Before being removed from school, Takoda had been enrolled at Horace Mann Elementary in Dayton. Staff there observed that he needed extra support, but couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. He often arrived at school unkempt, and his appearance made him a target for teasing. Teachers did their best to help him. They cleaned his clothes and provided clean outfits so he could feel more comfortable and confident during the day. Still, Takoda remained isolated, often sitting alone and struggling to connect with classmates. When the school contacted McLean about their concerns, his reaction was hostile. He demanded they stop getting involved and even barred the nurse from seeing his son. And according to McLean's girlfriend, Amanda, he required daily updates from the teachers. McLean often forced Takoda to stand in uncomfortable positions for long periods and carry heavy backpacks until the end of the day. These routines seemed more about control than discipline. The school took notice and contacted Child Protective Services several times. However, when officials came to the house, Takoda was told to stay silent and remain out of sight. This wasn't a child pretending or being deceptive. He was simply afraid. When CPS finally spoke to him, Takoda was reserved and polite, offering no signs of distress. He didn't share any concerns about his home life. But once the visit ended, the situation at home reportedly worsened as McLean blamed Takoda for the attention from authorities. In May 2018, Takoda was officially withdrawn from school. From that point on, he lost the only place that offered him some sense of normalcy. Around this same period, McLean and Amanda began confining him to the attic for most of the day. He was only permitted to leave for meals or bathroom breaks under their supervision. Meanwhile, Amanda Hines continued to portray herself in public as a dedicated guardian, claiming to be responsible for Takoda's education at home. In November of that year, Takoda managed to escape by jumping from the attic window into the backyard. He was taken to the hospital by McLean and Amanda, who introduced herself as his mother. While his physical injuries were treated, doctors also recommended that he receive psychological support, recognizing the act as a clear signal of distress. However, Takoda never received that support. When social workers followed up to arrange counseling, the offer was declined. Instead, McLean reached out to the local court to inquire about programs for troubled youth. But when he found out the program focused on therapy rather than confinement, he rejected that option as well. His actions made it clear. He wasn't looking for help. He just didn't want to deal with his son anymore.
While the attic window was being fixed, Takoda was temporarily moved to the basement, which was normally used to house the family's pets. Once the repairs were completed, he was returned to the attic, now with no furnishings and a lock on the door. The earlier excuse about the lock being for dogs no longer applied. This was clearly a reaction to his previous attempt to leave. From that point on, Takoda remained in the attic, with very little contact with the rest of the household. His clothes had been taken away, and although he was permitted to come down to use the restroom, doing so without being fully dressed would lead to harsh consequences. To avoid further trouble, he was only allowed to come down late at night. If he did so during the day, he faced accusations of inappropriate behavior, even around younger children. On top of that, McLean used demeaning language, regularly calling him names meant to humiliate and belittle. Do you remember the third adult who lived in the house? That was Jennifer, Amanda's sister. Investigators later learned that all three adults were involved in what happened to Takoda. The group used a monitor connected to a camera installed in the attic to watch him from the living room. Takoda was made to stand in uncomfortable positions for long periods. If he shifted or moved out of place, the sisters would alert McClain, who would then punish him. Sadly, authorities discovered video evidence confirming this monitoring and mistreatment. During his interview, McClain made repeated remarks about Takoda's behavior, but it was later revealed that these actions were not voluntary. He was forced into them. After being denied access to the restroom, Takoda had no choice but to use the attic floor. In response, McClain imposed degrading punishment rather than providing support or addressing the situation properly. Takoda resisted many times, but McClain continued to pressure him through force. Eventually, Takoda began to comply, not out of agreement, but because he feared the consequences of refusing even more. There were also concerns about McClain's frequent alcohol use. He would often return home intoxicated and, according to statements, would direct his frustrations toward his son. Jennifer once heard Takoda crying softly in another room, saying, "No more." Both she and Amanda later confirmed that McClain often used physical discipline with Takoda. On December 13th, Jennifer told Takoda he could come downstairs to use the bathroom. As he stepped out of the attic, he struggled to keep his balance. He was visibly weak, nearly falling down the stairs before catching himself on the railing and walls. When his father noticed Takoda having difficulty walking, he reacted harshly, striking him and sending him back to the attic. Once upstairs, Takoda was told to tidy up and assume a rigid standing posture, something his father often demanded as a form of control. But when Takoda didn't respond quickly, his father pushed him down and sat on him with full force, pushing him further by using the ceiling for extra leverage. At the time, McClain weighed over 200 pounds. While Takoda's exact weight wasn't reported, it was noted he was smaller than typical for a child his age. Afterward, McClain returned downstairs and sat with Amanda and Jennifer to watch television. He occasionally called out harsh words toward his son during this time. Later, he went back upstairs with a bottle of hot sauce, which he used as a form of discipline. According to Jennifer, this had happened several times during the final week of Takoda's life. McClain referred to this treatment as his way of parenting. On the afternoon of December 13th, 2019, Takoda managed to break free from the suffering he had endured for so long. At last, he was no longer trapped in the environment that had caused him so much pain. The following day, all three adults involved were taken into custody and formally charged with the death of Takoda Collins. While being transported, McClain expressed frustration about facing prison time. He ultimately confessed to unlawfully taking his child, engaging in acts, and being responsible for his son's passing. His charges were extensive, requiring several minutes just to list. He was sentenced to serve between 51 years and life in prison and will be required to comply with the highest level of offender registration requirements. Amanda Hines pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and multiple counts of child endangerment, resulting in a prison term of 22 to 27 years. Jennifer Ebert received an 8-year prison sentence for her involvement. Despite living in the same home as McClain, she never contacted the police or child protective services, nor did she try to intervene. Takoda's difficulties began early in life. His mother, Robin Collins, lost custody of him in 2008 after incidents occurred when he was a baby. When the media asked Robin why she hadn't been present for her son, especially knowing about Al McClain's behavior, her answer sounded defensive. Prosecutor Linda Doe stated, "This was an extremely distressing case. Takoda endured years of ongoing and relentless suffering that is difficult to even imagine. The fact that both defendants are now facing prison time marks an important milestone in justice." There were many people who cared for Takoda, teachers, school staff, and others who interacted with him. He was a child who deserved love and support, but unfortunately, he never found peace or safety during his life. We hope that this verdict can offer some measure of comfort to those who cared about him. Prosecutor Matt Heck highlighted the next steps after such a difficult case. "I believe the period for placing blame is behind us. The focus now must be on being proactive and constructive, asking ourselves what changes need to be made in the system so that nothing like this ever occurs again. This is a deeply upsetting situation, one that is hard to fully comprehend, especially since Takoda endured this for years." It's essential that organizations involved in child welfare, including children's services, hospitals, law enforcement, and prosecutors, come together in close cooperation. By working hand in hand, we can improve protections and make sure children receive the care and safety they deserve.